All right, welcome everybody to our first episode of Something Spacey. This is our new sort of podcast pseudo thing that we're going to do here on the D Room channel that we have. And essentially, what this series is going to be is pretty much what the name says. It's Something Spacey. So as we go through these episodes and new episodes come out, we're pretty much just going to be talking about a topic related to space flight, anything like that, whether it be real or fictional as well. So Christian and I have talked about that we potentially will talk about Dune whenever that comes out. We'll have a little spoiler cast on that, I guess. We'll talk about Star Wars because that's a common interest that we have there. But besides that, I mean, we're obviously going to talk about real world space stuff because that is important too. And so I guess for this first episode, we're just going to do some introductions here that we have. So Christian, I let you go first for this.
Sure. Yeah. So, like John said, our show is going to cover a wide breadth of space-related topics, whether it be science fiction or science. But to give a little bit of a background, so you can, know that at least we know some of what we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
Both John and I do have backgrounds, both within the education and academic world of space and space flight. We are both planetarium educators. We both teach astronomy and science. Along with that, we have both studied spaceflight operations, aerospace life sciences, things of that nature. What we both done in particular as far as focusing on whatever disciplines, I know John has done quite a bit. I have focused on a bit of the aerospace life sciences myself, with a little bit of spaceflight operations just within kind of a theoretical standpoint. And then of course, a teeny tiny bit of the engineering. I don't have the math prowess. I don't have any of the math to really get into that, but just a working knowledge of the operational standpoints of space so I can better teach it.
Well, so I guess one sort of important thing to highlight on here is how you and I met, pretty much. So we both work at a museum that has a planetarium.
An undisclosed location.
An undisclosed museum here somewhere in where we live.
Earth.
Yeah, and so we're both planetarium educators. So our job, in a sense, is to teach, to educate the public on things that are happening in space flight and all of that. We may have some people on it at some point or another that we work with in that sort of planetarium industry. And we basically, both of us love space. Obviously, I mean, we wouldn't be doing this sort of little podcast here if we didn't love space. And just putting it out there as well, this is a safe for work channel too. So we're not going to curse or anything like that. And if we do, we'll do our best to sort of bleep it out in those moments. But for the most part, this will be a fairly safe for work thing. So if you are listening to this at work, don't feel bad, or anything like that, because you are hopefully going to be learning something here along the way.
Yeah. This is going to be safe for everyone, really. So even beyond work. Because we want to teach everyone. So
right, exactly.
All kind of ages kind of thing.
Exactly. And going back to it, that's sort of our job right now anyway. I don't think Christian or I either pretty much want to stick with that potential in the future because we are part-time. But
hey,
well, I mean,
hey,
do you want to get into do you want to get into it? Do you want to what? So let's get into that. What are some of your goals, aspirations that you have? Like, what do you want to do in the future?
My goal is to stay in some capacity as a teacher within space. Once I complete my undergrad, which I'm very close to completing, with a little scary how close I am.
Congratulations there.
Yes, thank you. I do plan on pursuing graduate studies within astronomy. And so I plan on focusing within the discipline of astronomy with regards to teaching. So it's something that I do want to continue. I hope to not always do it in a part-time capacity, whether it be within this museum or another one. That is still up for the future. But however, I kind of want to stay within that ecosystem. I also want to study. I also want to do graduate work within astronomy, and so that means research. We'll see where that goes, though. So I'm kind of leaving the spaceflight operations side of things, and I'm gearing more towards the academic astronomy kind of setting where we won't even be touching spaceflight. It's kind of purely observational, and it's purely observational astronomy and education.
Okay. Yeah, and so that kind of goes to your time in Hawaii that you had as well, of
Yes.
When you were part of the Hawaiian Astronomical Society,
Yes,
or
which
something
is,
like that. So yeah,
yes,
if you want to talk about that really quick.
Sure. Yeah. So I was a member for 3 years within the Hawaiian Astronomical Society. That name is kind of a glorified name. It is a amateur astronomer club, essentially. However, because it's Hawaii, there's not a lot of clubs there for this. It kind of tied into the academic institution of the University of Hawaii and the Bishop Museum, which had a planetarium. So all of these things kind of intertwined, where the people who were part of this club were also educators, both within the university and the planetarium at the Bishop Museum, and we would even host meetings at the Bishop Museum Planetarium. And so it was kind of a smattering of amateur astronomers, the public like myself, and educators. So that's why it was kind of this society. But we did a lot of outreaches. We did a lot of outreaches for the public, inviting them to star parties, big celestial events we would host at our dark sky site, which was in the North Shore, near the small kind of civilian leisure craft airport.
Let's explain what a dark sky is, because I don't, just for the people out there that might be listening to this that don't exactly know some of these astronomy terms or stuff like that. Let's kind of make it more accessible to the layman listening to this podcast. When I say dark sky like event or dark sky location, I am describing just an area that's either recognized by probably one of the various astronomical societies or unions out there as a registered dark sky site, where there is a certain percentage of low light pollution or zero light pollution, that we go and host these events so we can get a better look at the dark sky site. Hawaii has one in the North Shore that luckily the mountains of the North Shore block much of the light from Honolulu, and so that is like the only dark sky site on the island. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's if you ever look at a map of Hawaii, or at least Oahu, the capital, there's you have Honolulu, and then you have like essentially a valley that cuts through it, and then you have a mountain range towards the north that kind of further blocks much of that light, and so that's a dark sky site. And so we have star parties there, dark sky parties or whatever. And we have a few here.
How visible was the Milky Way in that
Almost
area?
Completely. It was
awesome.
It was very easy to see.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and so you and we were on a lower degree of latitude towards the equator, and so what that means is that we had a better view of the southern skies. We were closer to the equator, so I think you can see some elements of the Southern Cross, if I'm not mistaken. You can certainly see very easily constellations of Orion and stuff like that. That's in the northern skies, or southern skies. I'm sorry, a little bit easier. Yeah, so you had a very good view of the nighttime sky in Hawaii, and so because it's an island kind of secluded, we didn't have kind of the networking with a lot of the dark sky clubs and stuff like that you might hear in the lower 48 states. And so we were kind of on our own. So it gave me an opportunity to really learn about astronomy and really get excited about it. That was when I first saw the planet Jupiter through a telescope and the moons of Jupiter for the first time. And that was kind of that clicking moment where I really fell in love with astronomy as a kind of casual observer. But then it helped me better understand the scientific method, because you get into you connect with the researchers and stuff like that, and you hear their stories, and you hear how they kind of study astronomy, and then you kind of pick up on those things, and it was really cool. It was really cool. Kind of my first exposure to just the a world of science, and asking questions and analyzing the world around you, or the universe around you in this case.
Yeah, I completely understand that. The thing that you mentioned about Jupiter and Saturn and seeing their moons, I kind of had something similar for what I've jokingly referred to as like your great space awakening, in a sense.
Yeah.
Like I sort of had like a similar moment when so I graduated from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University with a degree in interdisciplinary studies. So it's kind of a mix or a hodgepodge of a bunch of different things. My minors for that degree, or my sort of areas of focus for that, were, again, aerospace life sciences, human factors, spaceflight operations, and then I also had humanities in there as well, and that kind of leads into what I am doing now, but we'll talk about that a little later. But going back to it with Jupiter and Saturn and seeing their moons, I sort of had a similar thing where I took an astronomy class my freshman semester there at Riddle, and I remember one time we went up onto the roof of one of the buildings there, and they brought out the telescopes, which I know you're familiar with because you are also in the astronomy club there. Yes.
Too. By the way, we come from the same university.
Right. Yeah.
So we're both Eagles, I guess.
Yeah. I guess go Eagles.
Yeah. Forever an Eagle. But
right.
yeah. So.
So they brought out one of the small telescopes that they had there. And our professor was, teaching us how to use it and all of that. And this was years before either of us worked at the museum that we work at now, or anything like that. And this was sort of my experience there up on the roof of this college building that I remember vividly. I looked through it, and you could see Saturn as clear as day, and you can see the rings around it, the partitions between the rings, and some of the moons surrounding it there too. And that was part of my moment that I realized, like, oh yeah, this is what I want to do. Now that has changed going forward, as I'm sure you can attest to that, Christian, that I have changed the things that I want to do drastically. Just because I'm interested in so many different things, which is another reason that I think that this podcast series that we're doing can benefit a lot from that sort of stuff, because we're both interested in a lot of different things.
Well, you mentioned earlier, your pursuit of an interdisciplinary studies track, and how you kind of focus on a number of a multidisciplinary kind of thing. Right.
I mean, if that speaks to my indecisiveness at all, then
I wouldn't call it indecisiveness. Maybe kind of Renaissance nature, kind of a better way of putting indecisiveness.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah. No. Absolutely.
Well, that really speaks to the nature of this show. We're going to talk about both fiction and science fiction within this show, and you're getting into a lot of media stuff, not media, but kind of like storytelling. And can you tell me a little bit about your graduate
program? So I'm doing my master's right now, is going to be graduating this May with
congratulations.
Thank you with a master in interactive digital media. So basically it focuses on storytelling elements, creative elements, that sort of stuff of aspects within digital media. So things that include social media is one of those. Obviously, I mean, we're here on YouTube now. What I am working with specifically is 3D printing, projection mapping, that sort of stuff. So one of the things that we want to do on the channel, not Something Spacey, but as the D Room as a whole, is I think we talked about having potentially Disney vlogs at one point. And I think those will be fun because we could go to Disney and, piece apart and talk about some of the technologies that they're using, like projection mapping, which is absolutely everywhere at Disney now. And I think even Kennedy Space Center has that too.
I was going to say that,
Right, that they're doing that sort of stuff. Like what you talked about to me in private with the... what was it? It was the
I know what you're talking about. It was the screens.
Yes, the screens and the display cases.
Yes.
I think you said it was Sony that made those, or
a very big company created a prototype of a and I don't want to go off on a tangent on this. We'll talk about this probably in an episode. These state-of-the-art windows that are completely clear until there's I guess a charge through them, and then it activates some certain aspect of like some layer of that mirror, and it turns it into what appears to be a fully functional television screen, essentially.
That's so cool.
You can't even see through it. It goes from like window to a full-fledged 4K TV like that. We'll talk more about that.
That's wild.
It kind of goes. It's very interesting how we've kind of met, and how all of these disciplines seem to very come together and work very well within teaching astronomy in kind of a planetarium setting, because you need to have an understanding of all of these things, not just an understanding of the nighttime sky. To be able to effectively teach. It is we're dealing with AV. We are dealing with sound. We are dealing with kind of our presence as media presenters, essentially, both live and through social media or YouTube, or anything like that. And so all of these things still kind of connect, and I think they help to supplement and enhance the teaching experience.
It constantly surprises me how interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, whatever you want to call it, planetariums are, but also just like the museum world as a whole.
Just the education world,
right?
For space, at least.
Even just broadening it out even more than that.
I'm thinking like Bill Nye,
the
just
education world. Exactly.
Yeah.
Bill Nye is a great example, because I mean, like, you and I are in that age demographic that we grew up with Bill Nye.
90s kid. Yeah.
Right, like we grew up watching Bill Nye and that sort of stuff, and I mean, in many ways, he's the one that sort of shaped our understanding of science in a lot of those contexts. And I know that now, like, kids will look to Neil deGrasse Tyson and that sort of stuff because of his Cosmos series, which is a reboot of the Carl Sagan's
of another
original
educator, Carl Sagan.
Right, exactly. So
these things kind of connect.
Exactly. Yeah, you grew up with Carl Sagan or the Bill Nye, and then now Neil deGrasse Tyson. Exactly.
I say Bill Nye specifically, however, because of his use of multimedia, of his use of television, especially in the 90s, kind of bringing those shows into the classroom and into the home, and using effects and props and all of these things. I think about his kind of laboratory and his world that he created, this kind of really dynamic and fun world. Even having music videos, which were sometimes kind of interesting, but all of these things.
And I believe
it was more than just teaching.
I could be wrong, and I could be wrong on this, but I believe that those were Disney productions as well.
I'm not. You know more about that than me. By the way, John is our Disney expert. By the way,
Star Wars expert, Disney expert.
Future Imagineer here.
So like that. So that kind of gets back to it of what I'm wanting to do after I graduate is hopefully, potentially, eventually working for one of those companies under the Disney umbrella. That's ideally where I would want to be. I love the museum that we work at now, and I do want to continue working there. If you're listening to this from that museum, I do still want my job. But also, I mean, my goals are I want to make interactive installations, and I know that this is something that I've talked about to some of the higher ups there at the museum. Is potentially implementing like augmented reality apps that guests can use to interact with exhibits there at the museum, or different sort of displays and that sort of thing. That's more along what I want to do. Is in the larger sort of scheme of things, I am working towards being a storyteller more than anything, which I think is one of the great things about being on YouTube now is we have the ability to tell those stories that we've wanted to tell in different formats. And that sort of goes to the larger D Room as a whole. Is we're a variety channel, and what we make is not for everybody, obviously, because nothing is in this world, but we will hopefully have something that is interesting for everyone eventually. Something that you personally might be interested in. And so that sort of goes back to that of the storytelling aspects like that. But as well, I guess it's kind of worth touching on my past before my master's, because I did a lot in undergrad when I was at Riddle as well. So again, I had the interdisciplinary studies degree, but I also did a lot of stuff with space flight because at the time, I wanted to graduate and go pursue being an astronaut in some way or another. And that's still, an idea that is on the back burner, I guess. It's not a forefront objective anymore.
It's a dream that a lot of people have. But can you give the audience a little bit of context to that? Because when they hear astronaut, they think of like this really grandiose kind of like almost unattainable thing, but we have an understanding of kind of the industry, both within federal and commercial space flight, that might open some doors to people in the future, to include yourself, on perhaps being a commercial astronaut or suborbital space flight and stuff like that. So I know
absolutely
that you actually have conducted some training within that for a period of time for a suborbital astronaut program. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I have, yeah. So one of the sort of big things, I guess, that I worked on was Project Possum, which stands for the Polar Suborbital Spaceflight in the Upper Mesosphere. So essentially what we would be doing was boarding a suborbital spacecraft. At the time, it was the X-Core Lynx, which does not exist anymore, but was going to be the X-Core Lynx, that we would board that craft and basically sit shotgun in this spacecraft while someone else was flying it. We would go with them in the sort of passenger seat there, flying into the upper mesosphere, which we don't know is one of the top layers in our atmosphere. And as we would fly through that, we would take pictures. We were basically glorified photographers there, sitting shotgun in this spacecraft, to take pictures of these things called noctilucent clouds. And you can actually see these clouds when the sun is setting. Sometimes it's very rare to see, but there are cases of it. And if you search on Google noctilucent clouds or whatever, you'll get the image of what that looks like. There's sort of these wispy, almost ethereal looking clouds up there, and we don't really know a lot about them. We know a lot about the clouds here in the lower parts of the atmosphere because we can fly planes and jets up to those altitudes and study them that way. We also have ground observations that can look at them, and they're a lot closer. But these noctilucent clouds, the point of Project Possum was to study those because, again, we don't know a lot about them. They're just high enough that air-breathing aircraft cannot reach those altitudes, and they're just low enough that spacecraft can't reach them easily, orbital spacecraft, that is. And so with the X-Core Lynx, what the sort of project was to fly through the upper mesosphere there, and in a suborbital fashion. So we would get one shot going up and then one shot coming down, and so we'd get two chances basically to take pictures of these clouds. And they really happen in the higher altitudes there. But again, I don't want to get too much into it with this episode. We can come out with another episode a little later that touches on that specifically.
Yeah, it gets into detail on like what you did, your training,
right?
kind of stuff
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
Which is really exciting stuff.
Yeah, right. Yeah. We'll have an episode eventually on like the training of that, what it was like, all that sort of stuff. Because Project Possum is still around. You can still do it and that sort of stuff. But yeah, I also did a lot of other stuff. I have been part of the Aerospace Medical Association too, which is cool. Just a fancy title saying that, you know, I worked in some aspect of or being a student in some sort of medical human factors field that is related to aerospace or aviation in some way. So that's pretty much what that was. I've also done the Mars Desert Research Station, which is a simulation mission out to Hanksville, Utah. So we lived out there in what essentially was a tin can for 2 weeks out in the middle of the desert. Yeah. And every time we'd have to go outside, we would have to don a spacesuit and, you know, all this other stuff there, essentially to simulate what life would be like on Mars if we ever go there. And not just Mars, but also the moon. And that kind of goes to NASA's current objective of the Artemis program of sending astronauts back to the moon, but this time eventually setting up a permanent base of operations there on the South Pole, which is a cool thing that, again, we'll have another episode specifically dedicated to Artemis and all the things coming out surrounding that, that sort of stuff. But yeah, and then I also worked in the school's suborbital spaceflight simulator. So that kind of ties into Project Possum. That was the simulator that we would use, that we would fly in to simulate those missions of flying into space and stuff. So we would actually sit shotgun in the simulator there with a camera mounted to the side, and we would have to take pictures while in the spacesuit, while fully inflated and all that kind of stuff. And it was super fun, super cool.
That's really interesting stuff.
Yeah. So that's sort of what I have done in the past. And interestingly enough, Project Possum was part of the reason of why I'm doing the master's that I'm doing now. Is we learned a lot about cameras and you know, different aspects regarding that of like ISO and picture quality and, you know, color and that sort of thing. Because if we're taking pictures of these clouds and we're the only ones there, we need to know all of this stuff going up there pretty much. And so Project Possum, in a way, sort of led down this path of wanting to be a storyteller in a digital sort of form. By getting obsessed with cameras and photography to eventually, you know, expanding that out to being film, and then now having that be like projection mapping and all of these other crazy things. But yeah, so that's essentially my past and hopefully my future as well.
Yeah, it's very, very cool stuff. Yeah, seems like you have a really good grasp of just space in general. So
yeah, well, and I hope that comes across too on this podcast with both of us, that if you're listening to this, like, Christian and I do know what we're talking about in some,
well, at least I hope we do,
some sort of fashion, and if it's a topic,
we could be wrong as well. So,
well, and that's also
we'll
true.
do our homework in between, in between chapters here.
Right. That's also that's also the other thing too, is that if we don't know what we're talking about, or we're not as familiar with the topic that you guys suggest to us or whatever, then we're going to do our research on that, and we won't do that episode until we feel comfortable that we know the information enough to present it. And that kind of goes back to being planetarium educators too, is that I won't say anything in my show that I don't know or that I haven't researched enough that I feel comfortable teaching other people about.
Yeah. Yeah, and hopefully that comes across as implied, something, we want as, in the name of the scientific method and in the name of, fully objective research.
Absolutely, yeah.
We don't put anything out there that is misinformation, essentially. But also at the same time, this show is going to represent our passions, our love for all things space. So, there is a lot that we're going to be talking about that's just really fun, really, it's not going to be all, you're going to have to sit here through a lecture, essentially.
Right.
We want to talk about the exciting things that really gets us motivated. Like we're very, we live close enough to the Cape to where we could, see space flight happening, and that gets us really excited. We also live close enough to the kind of entertainment hub for the things that we love, Star Wars, Disney that you really love, John.
Right. I mean, yeah. I mean, we might even have some, just thinking about it now, we might even have some Something Spacey episodes where there's video involved, and we go down to
on location
Kennedy,
kind of things.
Right.
Yeah,
we go down to
plans
Kennedy
for that,
Space
definitely.
Center. Yeah, we go down to Kennedy Space Center and go to the visitor complex there, go see a rocket launch, and we talk about that and basically do more of a vlog and less of a podcast, but something like that. I think that would be fun for some later episodes too. And of course, you can let us know down in the comments what you think about all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it's this is a shared interest of space. And so we'll also be doing quite a bit on astronomy. We'll tell you what some of the big events are over the coming year. We already have one, Mars. Mars is going to be in the news quite a bit over the next year, partly because of the Perseverance rover that's making its way towards Mars as we speak. So that's really
February
to date this
18th.
Episode.
Right.
It's really exciting stuff, and so we'll be covering that, and we'll just be covering Mars just in general because it's such an awesome thing. We are reaching a point that we refer to as the Mars generation, to where we will see people on the red planet very soon.
Hopefully,
probably in the next 10 years or
maybe
over next 10 years. So it's not going to be in like the next year or two, but
I mean, with all the stuff surrounding SpaceX and Starship, with all the launches and everything. I mean, even though they had the failure coming back in for re-entry, like that's still awesome that they're launching a rocket that is more powerful than the Saturn V. That is, I think it's the same size as the Empire State Building, something like that, into space. Like that is crazy. Like that's not even something that if you were a kid watching Buck Rogers that you would think about would be a potential future here on Earth. Like, it was crazy.
That was definitely something of science fiction. It was something that you would see like a von Braun sketch of or something like that, of these like landing rockets and all of this really exciting stuff that we're seeing now. And you mentioned the word failure with regards to the SN8. They learned a lot from that, and I just want to say from the onset that when we use the word failure here in the show, it means something entirely different. It means a learning lesson. So, a lot of data was collected from that, and I'm willing to bet that future missions are going to learn and benefit quite a bit from that explosion that we saw not too long ago.
Right, and a lot of people like to say failure is not an option, and that was really a phrase that picked up popularity after Apollo 13.
It's on my. I'm looking right at it on my wall.
Right, exactly.
I have it taped on my wall just for me as a student.
Right, and it's sort of a bad mentality to have in a way. Like if you're having humans involved, obviously for Apollo 13, failure is not really an option that you want to happen. Because you want those people to return home, return back
and that's
to Earth.
The context in why Gene Kranz said that. It's like
exactly
already had a full-fledged mission going on, and so at that point in time, failure was certainly not an option. So
right. But the thing that I'm getting at here is that failure is absolutely an option. And if you're listening to this,
Okay.
not to get too motivational and hand wavy with it,
Sure.
failure is absolutely an option, and you can learn so much from those failed events, failed opportunities, like
Okay.
failed whatever it is. And that's sort of NASA's thing right now is, and SpaceX, going to that too, of they're not hurt that Starship exploded. They learned a lot from the explosion. They learned a lot about what they can do, what they can't do, all that kind of stuff. And I think it was like 90% successful of them coming back.
We'll do
down.
research on those numbers if we throw numbers on the show.
Right. I know.
When we do a specific future episode, there's yeah.
I know. We're throwing out a lot of numbers here, but
Yeah.
But still, like you get the point with that. And so, we're absolutely gonna have episodes dedicated to Starship, to SpaceX. I will say right now that we're gonna have a Perseverance episode, and we're gonna do our best to have that recorded, edited, and come out on the day, if not the day after, of the Perseverance landing.
Oh, you made a promise. Now we got to let me write that down.
Yeah, write it down. Write it down because we'll both forget. I know we'll both forget. But just specifically to have it around an important event like that, and we'll try to have that with important events that happen, like SLS launch or that sort of thing. Obviously, we're a little late to the game with Demo 2 mission for SpaceX, but hopefully we can get some of those others. Yeah,
and we also want to promote engagement too. So if you're listening to this first episode as the first episode, and we're not too far in the future, I know it's a cliche, throw it in the comments, but we really want to hear what you all want to learn about space.
Absolutely.
And that could be literally everything. If you want to hear the science behind blasters from Star Wars, we'll try to make an episode that's on par with how close to that we can get. But the novel idea of this show, and I was thinking about this while you were talking, just about all of this, is we have the unique opportunity to kind of create something that is kind of led by the public, led by the people, and so we want to promote engagement in this show, especially in order for us to, both, give you all what you want as far as like an episode or as content, but also learn ourselves on like things that are important to, the people, and how we could better, teach you all about the science of space, the operations of space, astronomy, things, science fiction, storytelling, because all of these things are important in education and in kind of, promoting excitement in space. So, we really want to hear from you.
Absolutely, and I think you hit a good point there, that we're in a way going to be holding science fiction to the same bar as reality when it comes to talking about space on this show, because like you said too, it's what partially inspires things like that. Like I remember when The Martian came out, all the excitement that was around that, and I've given God knows how many talks about my time at the Mars Desert Research Station at MDRS related to The Martian, and so I mean, we're absolutely going to talk about all that stuff. And if we do talk about science fiction, we're going to try to tie it back into the real world. Obviously, with the Dune spoiler cast that we're already sort of throwing out there, that's not going to have any bearing on reality. We're just doing that for fun.
There's a lot of political stuff within Dune, but we'll try to avoid some of that.
Yeah, we'll try to avoid that stuff. But I mean, just like relating it back to the book and what we thought about it and all that kind of stuff. That's more along the line.
Well, however, it's all of those things are really important. So within science fiction, politics and culture find a home within science fiction. I think more than any other type of fiction.
Sure, absolutely.
Because it kind of gives you a world of tomorrow kind of perspective, both in a utopian and dystopian kind of aspect.
Yeah.
And so science fiction can get very political too, and that's why while we will be taking a kind of empirical analysis of maybe some of the mechanics of science fiction, worlds such as Dune lend themselves to speculation and just kind of like the importance of storytelling on the lives of people. I'm trying not to get too hand wavy right now, but Dune and other high science fictions are less about the technology and more about like humanity or just culture.
And right, so and I think that it lends a hand too, with both of us having that interdisciplinary background, that we can both sort of touch on that stuff of, obviously I'll myself will be leaning more towards like the storytelling elements and like cinematics and all that kind of stuff, and you the science and all of that and the politics and that sort of thing, but. And
even the philosophical, I think there is a lot to say within the philosophical aspects of science fiction. I think it's important, especially when we get into genres such as cyberpunk and Afrofuturism, which are incredibly important parts.
Absolutely, yeah.
So we'll be talking about all that really cool stuff. I'm going to go on a Ghost in the Shell like tangent for one episode. You heard it here first.
Okay, yeah, for sure.
John already knows.
We'll do a Ghost in the Shell episode. We may even spin off into another like just science fiction dedicated, but we'll see. Yeah. We'll see what the future holds. For now,
I know there's
we're sticking to something
no
spacey.
bearing on space there. However, we'll talk about technology as well. So
I mean, and so that kind of gets into the other point of the interest that we have, because again, we do want to make it a group effort here. Like if you have something that you're interested in hearing us talk about, definitely write it down in the comments, or if you know us personally, like text us or whatever, and we'll try to fit it into an episode.
Hit me up.
Right, we'll try to fit it into an episode, but I mean, like some of the stuff that I am interested in, that I talk about the most, and as a planetarium educator, what I talk about most in my shows even is like astrobiology and the search for life, and that sort of stuff, because that's partially my background with the aerospace life sciences, and always being fascinated by biology. I mean, Christian, I'm setting up a nano reef tank here in my house, like of having corals just like they're so alien looking. And so, that sort of gets into like my interests. And Christian, I mean, you even stated a little bit earlier that your interests are more towards like astronomy and like the science of the planets and the stars and that sort of thing, and like actually the technical mechanics and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, the physical properties of celestial bodies, astrophysics.
So I'm hoping that with this podcast series as we go forward, there's enough of the sort of Venn diagram between both of us that comes across that will make these episodes interesting. And of course, obviously, again, write it down.
Dynamic,
Right. And again, write it down in the comments. Let us know. We want to know your thoughts as we go through these this series here.
You want to hear me talk about the physical properties of stars? Cool. You want to hear me talk about the United Nations space treaties and principles in outer space? Sure. Why not?
Absolutely.
Sure. That's I think the novel nature of this podcast. Where I'd like to kind of stylize us as kind of a interactive Bill Nye show, kind of thing like that, where it's like, we are looking at your feedback and kind of looking to what we can teach and how we can teach it based off of that, and kind of create this new precedent of almost live engaged teaching and learning and fun, there's no bounds as long as it has to do with something spacey.
Right. And so I think that's where we're going to leave it off for this episode. We'll get into more specific topics in the episodes that follow. But for our pilot episode, just to give you an overview of us and an overview of Something Spacey, what we hope to do with it. I think this is a good place to sort of leave that off. So let us know down in the comments what your thoughts are about this and what you want to hear, that sort of thing, and we will read them and consider them. And yeah, as always, stay spacey.
Yeah, stay spacey. We look forward to hearing from you all, and yeah, thanks again.
All right, bye-bye.